Hello and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Maye live today on Thursday, August 29th, heading closer to the end of the week, just before next week when we'll have officially a football game during the duration of that week. So we're just counting down the days now until we're officially back into the regular season of the NFL. But in relation to that, we're going to talk some more official decisions that were made and also continuing on with our series of ranking the final standing predictions for each division. That will come later on in the show. But to start off, we're going to mention two quarterback decisions that were made. The Patriots and the Steelers both announced that Russell Wilson and Jacoby Brissett will be their starting quarterbacks, so we're going to get to those two decisions. What did Mike Tomlin, what did Maye have to say on why Russ and Jacoby were both selected? And in recent development with the 49ers and Brandon Ayuk, another thing happened recently on Wednesday that I feel could be a breaking point in all of this, so we're going to touch on that as well, plus a couple more segments on today's show. But before we get started, this show is always better, I believe, when you guys give your opinion, ask a question, or share any opinion that you have to say on any of the topics or anything I have to say. And what better way to do it than with our brand new Super Chat feature that is available to you guys now with this show. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This is a great way to not only give a question, provide your opinion, or make a comment on anything I say or on any of the topics on any show, but it's also a great way to support our channel and to keep this sports content coming each and every day to you guys. So again, make sure to use the Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This makes it an absolute guarantee that I'm able to see your question. I'll share it on air, and that way it makes the show a little bit more interactive and a little bit more exciting as well. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as positive and as interactive as possible. But if you don't want to do that, and if you do prefer an alternative, you still have the option to use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, with any question, comment, or opinion that you'd like to share as well. We couldn't do what we do without your guys' amazing support each and every day, and we're so thankful to have you guys as part of our community. But now we can start off with one of the big quarterback decisions that actually broke this morning. On my way home, I actually saw that the Patriots did name Jacoby Brissett their starting quarterback for the 2024 year. Maye said in his decision, he spoke with both Jacoby Brissett and Maye, both separately and together, about his decision. Then he revealed it to all players in a team meeting just before he had his press conference and revealed the official decision to the entire media, and that's when it all obviously went out to everybody. And in his statement to the media, he mentioned that they're 100% behind Jacoby Brissett, and also in a much more detailed explanation on how he came to his decision, Maye said, "There are a lot of factors that led to this choice. I think the hard part is thinking in the short term and the long term at the same time. As an organization, though, we feel like Jacoby gives us our best chance to win right now." And that's what you'd expect, right? That's what you'd expect any head coach to say. Similarly, later on in the show when we talk about Mike Tomlin, it's all about winning right now, right? And that usually means going with the more experienced, more savvy veteran that you feel a little bit more safe going with, at least to start the year, right? At least to get everything going, see what works, see what doesn't, sort of navigate through those murky waters if anything does happen to go wrong. You know, you rely on that veteran's experience, especially guys like Jacoby Brissett in this instance, because last week it was mentioned by Alex Van Pelt, the Patriots offensive coordinator, that one of the big reasons that he didn't say he was favoring Jacoby, but you can sort of tell by what he was saying that Jacoby's knowledge of that offense that both of them ran together with the Cleveland Browns just in 2022, that was a big sticking point with him, obviously, knowing the ins and outs of what Alex Van Pelt is trying to get out of this offense and knowing how to audible to different things, how does one play call, affect what a defense is doing, or how does the defensive lineup affect what you call at the line of scrimmage. All that sort of stuff comes with the numerous repetitions that Jacoby has ahead of Drake Maye, obviously being a rookie. So that's where I mentioned it to you guys in just these past episodes, right? Just going with the safer option just for right now, especially it's all relatable, right? It's all relative actually to each team. What the Patriots have to deal with in just this season is not the same as the Steelers and their quarterback decision. And with the Patriots, I just felt that it looks like you're going to be faced with a lot of obstacles, a lot of times being knocked down and having to get back up, and just learning a lot this season. So with that in mind, with this potentially being a bumpy ride, I feel like there's no real reason to throw out your rookie out there for a couple reasons that I will get to just a little bit. But I think overall, with Jacoby winning this job, it's not like a negative thing for Drake Maye. Obviously, he probably wanted to start, and he probably felt ready, or he felt that he improved a lot over the spring. But that's exactly where I'm going to, because I thought this was going to be a lot slower process. I didn't think we were going to look at Drake Maye and see what he was producing out there on the field until like halfway through the regular season, if that. But at that point, you wouldn't get a chance to see it obviously play out. You'd only hear about it in practice. But the fact that we got a chance to see it in the preseason, and not only that, but hearing about it as well throughout training camp, and how Drake slowly was gaining some more confidence. He was going out there and playing pretty well against, some joint practice opponents, or just the Patriots day in and day out defense as well. He was impressing a lot of people, so getting the chance to see that already at this early of a stage, I think is one of the better things to have developed already right now, because he pretty much closed that gap, a lot bigger gap, like I predicted, from the springtime, where there might have been some miscues, some mistakes. He closed that gap pretty quickly by the time the last preseason came around, and everybody was pretty, I wouldn't say 50-50 on it, but they thought it was a lot closer, and they wouldn't have been surprised if Drake Maye ended up starting 2024 as the starter, obviously. And that's sort of where also you got the inclination of that could have happened because of Jerod Mayo's words, because it was pretty interesting when he said that after their third preseason game, I want to say, Jerod Mayo mentioned that Drake Maye actually outplayed Jacoby Brissett in this year's preseason. He said he played better than Jacoby, but that their quarterback competition was also pretty open. It wasn't like Mike Tomlin saying that Russell was in the pole position or something like that, or that Jacoby had a leg up just because he was the veteran. You could have thought that, but Jerod Mayo never really mentioned it like that or spoke about it like that, especially over the last few weeks. So the fact that he mentioned that this was an open decision, the fact that he said that Drake Maye just outwardly saying that he played better, you kind of had a feeling that, you don't know really what's going to happen. You wouldn't have been surprised if Jerod Mayo named Drake Maye the starting quarterback. But, in that same breath, you got that inclination, but also it didn't really feel like a quarterback competition also, because now looking at it in hindsight, right, you hear what Jerod Mayo's saying, this quarterback played better. It's an open competition. If that was to be the case, I felt like if this was a true competition, then Drake Maye would have ultimately ended up winning the job, much like the Denver Broncos, for example. Jarrett Stidham was their starter last year. Bo Nix comes in and he plays better, so he earns the starting job. And it's different here with the Patriots. Obviously, I feel like it wasn't really an open competition, much like other people around the media sort of deemed the Steelers as saying it was an open competition, but not actually meaning it. It's sort of a similar thing with the Patriots in this instance, just because I feel like it was always going to be Jacoby. Not that that's the wrong decision. I actually think it is the right decision, because you have nothing to lose really, or really nothing to gain too much with just throwing Drake Maye out there. And that's the tricky part about it, right? Because I feel like Drake Maye will eventually play this year, but maneuvering when that point actually comes is going to be a very crucial thing to determine if you're Jerod Mayo, if you're Alex Van Pelt, and anybody making that decision. But now, with Jacoby being the starter, some things to look at to give you guys any indication of when maybe he could be pulled, or making sure he keeps up these things to keep that starting job over the course of 2024. Some things I'll be looking at would be just showing that command of that offense. Obviously, that was a big reason why he got that job, knowing what to do with this offense, knowing how to run it. So making sure to show that command is non-negotiable. Also limiting the turnovers, the protecting the football as well, and just making good decisions ultimately, because this is a young team. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be some hiccups, but making sure that people don't look at you as the reason that you're losing, I think that's pretty much all you could ask for or from Jacoby Brissett. And then something else to keep in mind with the Patriots is that their offensive line has been a struggling point throughout preseason. So, giving up pressure, allowing pressure to come in with less than half a second each time, whichever quarterback was back there, that wasn't going to change. So with that being a questionable portion of your team, not to, say that you're okay with Jacoby taking those hits or anything like that, but again, you don't want your rookie quarterback going out there and then just getting killed or being rushed and then throwing interceptions and things like that. Jacoby, more so than not than Drake Maye, knows how to maneuver and knows how to navigate through those scenarios and try to limit the pressure as much as possible with changing the protection lineups or things like that. So that's another reason. Keeping track of that offensive line and hoping that it gets better will be a crucial point for the Patriots this year. But ultimately, it is Jacoby Brissett's job now. It is his job to lose. It always felt like it was that way once the announcement was made that he was going to sign there, once they drafted Drake Maye. I always felt it was going to be that, and now it's just a matter of when we see Drake Maye, not if, because again, I feel like he is going to play at some point this year. You don't draft a guy that high to just sit him on the bench all year. That's just me, but leave your guys' thoughts on when and if we will see Drake Maye. I really, really do believe we're going to see him, but we're just going to have to wait and see when. But ending on one quarterback decision and starting another one, the Steelers also named Russell Wilson their starting quarterback. We're going to talk about that, what went into the decision, and whether or not this was the right decision, obviously. So that is coming up after the break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
I'm almost freaking out right now because I just got some breaking news that I have to share with you guys now. Okay, that's enough of that. The 49ers and Brandon Ayuk reached an agreement today on a 4-year extension that will contractually tie the wide receiver to the 49ers for the next 5 seasons, according to Adam Schefter, just right now, completely throwing away the next segment I had planned for you guys. So, we'll see what we'll do about that, but I will find some more information on what that deal will ultimately be. And here it is. Brandon Ayuk is getting a front-loaded 4-year deal with the 49ers worth $120 million per year. So if I do the math real quick, 120 by 4, I should know this, is $30 million per year. I'll provide more details on that today or maybe tomorrow. We'll see. But I guess we will talk about Russell Wilson just for right now. Wow. That's nuts. That's nuts. Brandon Ayuk, $30 million per year. But that's not what we're going to talk about. What we're going to talk about is the Steelers, relatively to the Brandon Ayuk news. They were in talks with trading for him, but now that's all out the window. And with this news of quarterbacks and just finishing talking about the Patriots and who they will be having as their starting quarterback, we're going to talk about now the Steelers. Yesterday, the Pittsburgh Steelers, their head coach Mike Tomlin announced that Russell Wilson will officially be the starting quarterback for the 2024 season. After their third preseason game, we sort of got a heads up by Mike Tomlin that their decision was going to come at some point this week. He sort of said towards the end of their work week, and now we got it a little bit earlier, just on Wednesday, halfway through their work week. So now Tomlin mentioned it to the media that he met with both quarterbacks and informed them both of the decision prior to the announcement. He described it as a very difficult decision to make, but ultimately, it fell back on all the reasons that I pretty much mentioned with Jacoby and with the Patriots, speaking about his resume, speaking about who Russell Wilson is in terms of his reputation, still having the arm talent, obviously still there. The long throw, the deep ball was always an intriguing portion of Russell Wilson's game for the Steelers, and now that is ultimately what they're going with to start the year at least. And with this decision and how it relates to, Justin Fields, because obviously this was another one that sort of felt a lot closer than a lot of people gave credit for, at least at the beginning, right? Because when both of them were acquired, right away people thought that it was going to be Russell Wilson's job. With how everything broke down with Kenny Pickett and things like that, Russell Wilson coming in and sort of what you were hearing with some reports, you got the idea that, Russ was going to be the starter. And then once they traded for Justin Fields as well, then it got a little bit more confusing. And to add on top of that, when Russ, gets injured right before the start of training camp, you have Justin Fields right away get thrown to have the starter reps right off the bat in training camp. And while everybody, I feel like, sees the athleticism with Justin, his running ability is not that far back from some of the best. Just thinking of Lamar, Josh, Justin Fields is right up there, and that was always something that you were going to get with him. But I think throughout training camp, there was some excitement, some optimism that maybe Justin, with being in a new situation, being around maybe coaches that fit him, could develop him a little bit more in Arthur Smith and the Steelers quarterback coach, and just everything being around a new facility. A lot of people felt that in combination with the weapons that he had also with the Steelers as well, you think of George Pickens, Najee Harris, and Pat Freiermuth, that this could be a great situation for Justin, not only in the grand scheme of things, but now with this unexpected opportunity with Russell Wilson being hurt. Everybody right away, started talking about it more. Maybe Justin should start. Maybe he offers more than Russell Wilson. He's younger. He can run a little bit more. Russell might not be there anymore, and he could be, done. He could be burnt out by now in regards to Russell Wilson. But Mike Tomlin, credit to him. He always kept it the same message each and every time anybody asked him whether or not Justin sort of gained an edge over Russell or whether or not they were on equal grounds now. Mike Tomlin always kept saying, the same old thing. Russell was in pole position each and every time. If I never have to hear that again, it'll be too soon. But, it just showed me that Russ has always and was always going to be a starting quarterback to me. That's why, I was excited as a Steelers fan seeing Justin Fields perform very well throughout training camp, making some nice throws, some good decision making. I think the turnovers and his processing was a big question in Chicago, and that seemed not to be completely gone with the Steelers, but it looked a little bit cleaner, at least throughout the footage and clips that I saw in training camp. But, Mike Tomlin, it seemed like he was never going to waver off of Russell Wilson unless he played like awful, like really bad. And even then, he didn't play in the preseason game. He played a good amount of snaps in practice, and then the third preseason came around and he only played one drive, and he played a little bit better, obviously, but how much can you really improve with one drive? And that was pretty much the final nail in the coffin for me. Seeing Russell just go out there, barely breaking a sweat, playing one drive, pretty much said to me that, Russ is going to be the starting quarterback. And now we were just waiting for the final announcement, the official announcement. But it doesn't mean that it is the end for Justin Fields by any means. Tomlin on the Rich Eisen show and also in his media conference after Wednesday's practice, he said that he didn't rule out the possibilities of having packages for Justin Fields, but he wouldn't give any further details on what that means or what specifically he would be doing in certain scenarios or anything like that. So we're going to have to wait and see on September the 8th when they play the Atlanta Falcons. But this was always the most likely outcome, not just because, or not only because Russ outplayed Justin Fields drastically or anything like that, but it always felt like the safer option. And the Steelers, if you follow them in any sort of manner over the last few years, it's very hard to convince Mike Tomlin of anything else that he has in his mind. Of course, he's willing to adapt and everything like that, but it always takes a good amount of time to finally see that change. They kept Matt Canada around a lot longer than I think a lot of people expected them to, and also, it's just that same sort of traditional feeling with the Steelers that they really have to be convinced about something until they go out and do it. And you saw it just when Omar Khan came in and drastically changed that. They were very aggressive with everything, going out and getting both Russell and Justin. It sort of flipped it a little bit now, but there are still those tendencies that you still see from Tomlin, from the Steelers, on making changes like that. So it felt like the safer option. And again, I say that sort of in a pessimistic, negative connotation, and I don't mean it to sound like that, but just because I feel like this was the right decision overall, and really for the opportunity to see just Justin Fields later on in the year, because at the beginning, I don't think a lot of teams start off the year perfect by any means. There are still a lot of things to work out, a lot of things that you try. Maybe you want to try again later on in the year, or they don't work at all. You want to scrap it and things like that. I feel like starting off with a veteran was always going to be a little bit smoother, and also you get the opportunity to work out all those kinks, work out your final rosters and who fits in what role through the first couple of weeks, and then it gives Justin Fields a better landscape to come into when he is needed, if he is needed this season, and he doesn't have to work or shuffle through a lot of other problems that I think Russell Wilson was better suited to handle and maneuver this team through. And also with how the schedule broke down, it was never going to be a case that Russell wasn't going to play against the Broncos. That was always going to happen. He was going to play against the Falcons, and he was, of course, going to be the starting quarterback against the Denver Broncos. You couldn't have convinced me of anything else, quite honestly, so that was always going to happen. Another reason why I thought, Russ was going to be the starter, and just some factors in here to consider for watching Russ and making sure he does these things in order to keep his job a little bit longer, obviously, right? Some of those things that I'll be looking at would be, not taking unnecessary sacks, not trying to be Superman out there, holding the ball too long in that same breath. The decision-making is a big one, obviously, and the execution tagging along with putting up more points, because that has been a hard thing to do for the Steelers over the last couple of years. With Matt Canada, obviously, that was a big component of it, but now that you have a new offensive coordinator, they're not going to be perfect. They're not going to be scoring 25 points per game right off the bat, but it has to look a little bit cleaner, a little bit more exciting than just throwing out routes, throwing comeback routes, and not looking at the middle of the field at all. I think the Steelers did a good job of bringing in someone that can do that. We saw it a little bit in preseason, so hopefully it carries on into the regular season, or else, like all you guys were aware last year, those Steelers fans will get very loud when they don't want somebody to play or when they want someone honestly fired, like you heard all the chants about Matt Canada last year. So they're not going to be shy in sharing their opinion if this offense and Russ is just not doing it for them. So you don't want that, obviously, happening again. So that's going to be a big proponent of getting Russell to stay around as the starting quarterback if he's able to do all those things. And also, just lastly, with this, ultimately the final point with Russ and Justin and how they play into this decision, you pretty much already know what Russell Wilson is and what you're going to get out of him. At this point in his career, I think he's 34, 35 years old now. There's no real more room to grow. There's no more room. I think we've already hit that ceiling, obviously, with Russ, and he is a safer option because you know everything that he is capable of, right? But with Justin Fields, I think he could benefit a little bit more from fine-tuning his skills a little bit more, learning the offense, knowing what reads work, knowing what works against other defenses over the course of the year. I feel like that's going to be very beneficial to Justin when and if he gets his opportunity at some point this year. Hopefully he does, because both of them are on contract years. So if you don't see one quarterback at all, I don't really see a world where you can really extend them. So we're going to see when that decision does come. But for right now, for however many weeks, Russell Wilson will be the starting quarterback out there on Sundays for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But moving on with another topic, I guess we're going to have a little impromptu Brandon Ayuk segment on here, because I was going to talk about the frustrations that we saw on Wednesday with him not showing up to practice again, but I guess we'll tie that in. That'll be the next segment, talking about Brandon Ayuk and his new contract with the 49ers. So stay tuned. A lot more coming on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And now we're going to touch on the Brandon Ayuk news that just broke about like 20 minutes ago. I'll show you guys the segment I had planned, missing the practice on Wednesday, and I guess that's where we'll start. We're going to start in talking about that and how it ultimately led to this decision being made right now. Obviously, starting with everything with this Brandon Ayuk San Francisco 49ers saga, there was a lot of twists and turns and everything that you thought was going to happen, maybe being traded to the Browns, maybe being traded to the Patriots at one point, according to the reports that we got, but nothing was ever done because the 49ers either didn't like the offers they were getting, or Brandon Ayuk simply didn't want to be traded to those places. Now, then the Steelers got involved, and Brandon Ayuk reportedly wanted to go there, but again, the 49ers just didn't like their offers. So we were just stuck in this back and forth, issue going over with the 49ers and Brandon Ayuk. And then also, he was starting to hold in, since the start of training camp. And I guess I was right, because I was going to bring up the point of what happened on Wednesday as a sort of breaking point with this entire situation. And why I was going to say that was because on Wednesday, Brandon Ayuk was technically medically cleared to practice for the 49ers. According to the reports, he was dealing with some neck and back soreness throughout this entire time, so he wasn't allowed to get fined. He was holding in, but I was going to call it a hold in, but technically, he wasn't medically cleared, so they can't fine him for holding in. And that's why, another reason Kyle Shanahan and I guess John Lynch also failed to mention this scenario as an official hold-in because they were looking at it more so that, Ayuk just couldn't practice yet because he wasn't medically cleared. But on Wednesday, he finally got that clearance from the doctors, and he was only showing up to the practices, obviously, but once he got that clearance, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch talked about it on yesterday, and they said that they expected now for Brandon Ayuk to participate in practice, not just hang around and watch. They expected him to go out there and practice, and also Mike Garafolo, an NFL insider, also said that there was a little bit of an understanding there between Ayuk and the 49ers that he would practice because he was cleared now. And at the end of the day, he was contractually obligated to practice, right? He's not like a free agent or anything like that. Obviously, he does have one more year left on his deal, so he can be fined now. But with that being the case, it was a big, a lot of people made a big deal about it, right? Because Shanahan mentioned he was supposed to be there. John Lynch also said that he expects Brandon to practice. And again, to no one's surprise, at least not to me, Brandon Ayuk didn't show up to the practice at all. And it made it pretty awkward because you have the coach, the general manager saying that, yeah, he should be out here practicing. And then that same day, just hours later at that practice, the wide receiver just isn't there. So it leaves the head coach and, in this case, the general manager, John Lynch, in a bad light and just making them look a little bit, I don't even know what word I'm trying to look for, but it just makes them look bad, obviously, at the end of the day. And John Lynch, this was the first time you sort of noticed, like I mentioned, that breaking point, that turning of the corner, because afterwards he said, at some point you just got to play, referencing Brandon Ayuk, and just, he has to show up eventually. So this was the first time I sort of noticed a little bit of frustration just wanting to get this over with. And that's why when I planned this segment out, I felt like if Brandon just didn't continue to show up, I didn't think he was going to show up at all in training camp if he didn't get the deal that he wanted. I felt like they were inching now closer to a trade happening, obviously, because it felt like Shanahan and Lynch were at the point that they just wanted to move on from this. And in terms of the fines, Brandon Ayuk could have been subjected to about $45,769 fines each and every day that he missed a training camp practice. So there was that, and just the fact that they weren't really moving anywhere. I felt like a trade was coming, but of course, again, I predicted that something would happen, and the complete opposite happened. So now we're at this point where Brandon Ayuk signs this deal, and some more reports just coming in now. According to ESPN's Adam Schefter, he said, and I quote, "In the end, Brandon Ayuk accepted the same deal that he has had on the table since August 10th. Per league sources, his hold-in did not alter any part of his new 4-year, $120 million extension. He took the same deal that he had been there for the past 3 weeks. His hold-in is over." And it's just weird on how, unless I'm missing something, just the fact that it didn't really affect it, and just, I guess, in a way, this hold-in of sorts was just really the fact that he wasn't medically cleared, in a way, just the way that Adam Schefter reported it in that statement. He's had this offer on the table since August 10th, and just the fact that I guess you took a little bit more time to explore these options and really see if you could get a little bit more. He was doing a good job about it, making a big mess of this entire thing as it did eventually become was a great way to go about it if you really wanted to get traded. But apparently it just seems to be that he just wasn't medically cleared, and yesterday he doesn't show up. Of course, he doesn't get fined. Ultimately, you can assume that they knew that this deal was coming. And in regards to the frustration I kind of sensed with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, maybe that point sort of pushed them over the edge a little bit more to get this extension done. And now Brandon Ayuk is staying with the 49ers for the foreseeable future for the next 5 years. He is on that 5th-year option now, and then his full extension will kick in after this year. And that's fantastic news for the 49ers, obviously, because they're 11 days away from their Week 1 matchup on Monday Night Football against the New York Jets, and having Brandon Ayuk there, present with this team, is monumentally just a different scenario, right? Because not only are you thinking about that game on Monday with the Jets and that defense you're going to have to play if Brandon Ayuk was not there, it was obviously going to be a lot easier for the Jets to game plan around with having guys on that side of the ball like Quincy Williams, CJ Mosley, Sauce Gardner, guys like that. They got a lot of good players on that defense, and not having to worry about Brandon Ayuk would have made it a lot tougher, and I think the 49ers could have struggled similarly to what we saw last year with the situation with Chris Jones and the Chiefs and him eventually sitting out that first game. It didn't look very good for the Chiefs out there on the field. They end up losing the home opener at home, and then they proceed to extend Chris Jones right after that, and that's where, if Ayuk was not going to get traded, that's where I felt that this was heading towards. In a scenario where he was going to stay with the 49ers, I felt like that could have really accelerated the process. But now that he is going to be there, it's huge. There is still time for him to get up to speed, and there's nothing really changed offensively or anything like that. So it's not like he has to learn anything new or anything like that. But now just getting back into football shape, just like CeeDee Lamb. Agreeing to his contract a few days ago. Now Brandon is the next wide receiver to get his deal, and now that just leaves Ja'Marr Chase. And how does this contract doesn't really affect that too much, just because Brandon is only getting $30 million per year, and I'm saying that like it's nothing, right? But with what Ja'Marr Chase is ultimately after and how this relates to him, it's just that he is probably aiming a little bit more towards what Justin and CeeDee Lamb got, around $35 million. Actually, I saw a report today by ESPN that said, I don't know how much I believe of this, but it's coming from ESPN. They said that Ja'Marr is shooting for a contract like 160 over the next 4 years or something like that, shooting for $40 million per year, which would just be so just mind-blowing that if it actually does happen, would be just crazy right to start the year, or right before the start of the year, would just throw everything off for me. Honestly, if we just jump from $35 million to $40 million in the course of about a month since Justin Jefferson got his last deal. So that's reportedly what he's shooting for, but I don't know how likely you are to get that for that price with less than a week to go, or less than 2 weeks to go, I should say, to the start of the regular season. But that's the last thing I think we have to worry about now that Ayuk is going to stay on the 49ers, continuing to keep this Super Bowl window open for the 49ers, at least because a lot of people would have taken a large portion of their stock out of the 49ers if they didn't have Brandon Ayuk or they traded him. But now they don't have to worry about that. Now they could solely focus on getting back to the Super Bowl and eventually winning it. And not only is this great for their team, obviously talking about a Super Bowl, but also Brock Purdy and his development and continuing to see him take those next steps, because I'm sure Brock was one of those players that really did not want to see Brandon leave. They've built a great relationship. They've had great chemistry, and that could have hurt his chances a little bit if he had a down year without Brandon. Not to say that he's lacking any other weapons, but I think Brandon is definitely the most naturally talented wide receiver that they have on their team. Debo can do a little bit of everything, but Brandon, just talking about natural receiving ability, getting open, great hands, reliable target, I think that is something that Brock really thrived off of. So I'm sure he really didn't want him to leave, to play another great year, and now he's next up for the 49ers to get extended. But now saying that, I'm thinking about Trent Williams, and that's a more urgent topic for the 49ers now that they got Ayuk. Next is Trent Williams. I should have said then next year they can worry about Brock Purdy. But great news for the 49ers. Great news for Brandon Ayuk getting paid at the end of the day. $30 million, it's crazy to think that now that's the floor after just last year's offseason and how that was the max, how everything can just change in the matter of the year. But that's where we are now. Brandon Ayuk gets paid, and now it's just Jamar Chase left. But we will be moving on to some more topics now that I actually have planned. We're going to be talking about Dalvin Cook signing with the Dallas Cowboys to their practice squad. Why it is news, but it didn't really move the needle too much for me, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And then the last segment will be continuing the series on my predictions for each division and how they'll each shape out. We're going to be talking about the NFC South and the Panthers, the Saints, the Bucks, and the Falcons in the last segment of today's show. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and now after that craziness of the breaking news with Brandon Ayuk getting his deal out of the way, we're going to be talking about some more news regarding the Dallas Cowboys adding a new player to their practice squad, but ultimately to their team at the end of the day. Back on Monday, veteran running back Dalvin Cook flew into Dallas to meet with the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, he had a tryout there with them. And yesterday, it was made official that Dalvin Cook had signed with the Dallas Cowboys, but not to their official roster. He signed to their practice squad at the time being. And now the 29-year-old former Vikings, former Jets, former Ravens running back would be available for the Dallas Cowboys to their main roster during their Week 1 matchup against the Browns if he is needed. If the Cowboys decide to activate him to the main roster, he'll be available to do that. But for right now, he is slated as a practice squad player for the time being. And now, my feelings around Dalvin, before I really get into it and sharing it, I just giving you guys a little bit of context on Dalvin and how it's gone for him over the last few years, over the last few seasons. He's, I think he's been removed from being considered one of the best running backs in the NFL because it hasn't been too long, but it feels like a lot longer because from 2019 to 2022, only 2 years ago, he was named to 4 straight Pro Bowls. He tallied over 1,300 yards from scrimmage in each of those years, and again, considered one of the best running backs in the NFL during that time, but just that was only 2 years ago when that period ended. Then the Vikings moved on from him. He actually had shoulder surgery, and that sort of played into their decision to move on from him. He signs with the Jets, and it really doesn't take off from there because last year when he played with the Jets, he played in 15 games for them, recorded only 214 rushing yards with 0 touchdowns to his name, and that wasn't enough, obviously, to keep him on the roster. So he was cut by the New York Jets before the end of the season, and then he signed just a temporary deal with the Baltimore Ravens for the playoffs, but he only played against the Houston Texans in, just some dead time there towards the end when the Ravens had the game wrapped up. So that wasn't going to be a long-term plan. Obviously, he moves on from the Ravens, and now he has been a free agent all this time. He actually had another meeting planned with the Indianapolis Colts later this week or sometime right now, but obviously that was canceled, and he signed with the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys also released Royce Freeman on Tuesday, so it kind of was a domino effect. You bring in Dalvin, probably with the hope of signing him. Royce Freeman gets cut at the deadline to shave your roster down to 53, to the 53-man requirement. And now I presume that Dalvin Cook will ultimately step into that role vacated by Royce Freeman. I felt like the Cowboys, not only did they say they were going to have a running back by committee, but I felt like it was always going to be a three-man job, not just a running back duo of Zeke and Rico Dowdle. I thought Royce Freeman was going to get involved in there at some point in the year, but now that he is gone, it feels like it should be Dalvin, Zeke, and Rico Dowdle as the three main running backs for the Dallas Cowboys. And now how I feel about it, just the simple question of why for the Cowboys to sign Dalvin Cook. Really, at this point, 29 years old, I didn't really see any indication that he would be able to provide any more than what Royce Freeman was going to give you, honestly. Other than the fact that he is Dalvin Cook, obviously, but he hasn't played like it for the last 2 years. So really signing Royce, signing Dalvin, it's just pretty much the same thing at this point in their careers. I actually don't know how old Royce Freeman is, but I feel like the expectation with either running back was going to be the same at the end of the day. And I'm just not really a big fan of adding pretty much almost a carbon copy of what you have in Zeke at this point in his career as well, 29 years old for him as well. And I say that, but I'm also a fan of trying to get more values into the running backs, especially those running backs that are in their late 20s, even early 30s. I feel like you can get value out of them, but just as long as they give you reason to, right? If that makes sense. Just don't sign them off of the fact that they're 2 years removed from being what they once were. If Dalvin had been playing for the Jets and he put up decent numbers, close to 1,000 yards, a couple touchdowns or anything like that, then, signing a 29, 30-year-old running back just off of that season, I can see why you think that there is some upside there, obviously, and think why he can continue that on with your team. But seeing how he was just a backup last year, playing behind Breece Hall, getting barely 215 yards rushing, to then sign him now and have pretty much the two running backs that are in the same situation just is a little bit confusing to me. It's a little bit redundant, obviously, for the Cowboys and what their long-term plan is with this signing. Because honestly, talking past this year, I wouldn't be surprised if Dalvin isn't even on the team next year, or if they cut him at some point this year, if they have to make some more room. That could be a real possibility. So, again, I don't really see the benefit of signing Dalvin Cook right now. I know it is to their practice squad, but even that, what was the point of taking Royce Freeman out and just bringing on Dalvin if they're going to give you pretty much the same thing? Also, it just feels like the Cowboys are always late with everything that they do. It always feels like they're one step behind, just missing an opportunity or taking too long to get through. It's always a struggle. They're always dragging their feet, and that could get so frustrating. I could imagine. I'm not even a Dallas Cowboys fan, but it could just seem so frustrating when the last couple examples that we've had here, you look at CeeDee Lamb, he got his deal very late in this process, going back even to last year when they could have done it and he would have been a lot cheaper. Obviously, he has the season that he goes on and has, All-Pro and everything like that, right? Setting a bunch of records. But even then, they seem to have a plan to want to extend Dak first. They dragged their feet on this deal, not making a move and deciding on who to sign first, still holding out hope. And then you have just a wave of wide receivers that get signed, and it just drives up the price even more. And now you wait till the last minute, and CeeDee Lamb becomes a little bit more expensive, or a lot more expensive, actually. And you get that deal done, but it took a lot longer than I think people expected it to, obviously, because how could you not extend CeeDee Lamb after the year that he had? Then you look at this running back group specifically. I remember watching an interview on the Pivot podcast where Derrick Henry was a guest on, and he talked about the idea of signing with the Dallas Cowboys and, the opportunity of playing for them. And he said that he would be open to the idea of going there, but, an offer never came in. They waited a little bit too long for the opportunity of getting a guy like Derrick Henry, and that opportunity passed them by yet again. And then they ended up settling for Zeke and bringing him in for a similar reason, a similar just confusing reason, to me at least, because Zeke, after that year with the New England Patriots, he played 17 games, but he was coming off of his worst year just in the NFL in general, because he played those 17 games, had a career low in attempts with 184, career low in yards with 642, and a career low in touchdowns with only 5 touchdowns, albeit it was with a worse off Patriots team. But you see that kind of season and you still sign him because you sort of panic signed him just to get a running back in because you lost out on Tony Pollard, is not the right way to approach these decisions. And then also just thinking of other things that they took too long on. This decision with Mike McCarthy, we're not advocating for anybody to get fired, but after you perform like you do against the Packers at home and get beat that bad, the fact that they kept Mike McCarthy and they made that decision pretty quickly after that loss is just, again, it feels like they're going to be a year late on making that decision to move on from Mike McCarthy, because after this year, I feel like they're going to fire him anyway. So I don't really see the point of keeping him another year if you truly don't believe and haven't done enough to give him the best opportunity to extend that contract, right? It just feels like a lame duck year for McCarthy. And then also, talking about Dak Prescott, they're late with this decision even more, pushing it further and further back as we go on. And the further they do that, I feel like they're not going to get an extension done during the regular season. So the fact that they're dragging their heels on this also, not to absolve Dak from maybe holding his stance on wanting a set number and maybe the Cowboys can't meet it, that's fair. But again, it feels like they took too long with Dak, and now you have Trevor extended, you have Tua extended, Jordan Love gets a massive contract, and then once the time where you could have extended Dak, you waited too long, and now it feels too late, and you could be on the verge of losing one of the best quarterbacks just from 2023. So the overarching thought about this is that the Cowboys just overestimate how much time or how many opportunities they are going to have to improve their team, and then once it all goes wrong, they just settle or panic sign somebody, and then I think they're left with more questions than answers after, especially this, signing Dalvin Cook to a running back room that I don't think got any better. So I didn't really see the point of signing Dalvin, but it is the case now. He will be a Dallas Cowboy, so we'll see how they split up those shares and if they can get any sort of production out of that, because they're going to need somebody outside of just CeeDee and Dak to provide for this offense. But we shall see how the Cowboys go, always operating in their own way. So we're just going to have to wait to see how that turns out for them this year. But we do have one more topic to get to on today's show, just my final divisional standings and my predictions on how it will turn out. We're going to get to the NFC South in this last segment and talking about who could potentially be a new champion in this division from last year. So we'll get to all those details when we return in just a few seconds. We are back here now on the final segment of today's show just to get into more of the continued series on predicting the final standings for each division in the NFL. Yesterday we mentioned the NFC East for real that time, and now we're going to mention the NFC South. And just right off the bat, getting into it, this one I felt was a little bit easier to do than the NFC East. And with that being said, to finish last, obviously I don't think I'm going to get too many differing opinions on this. I still think it's going to be the Panthers because we are still at the start of this entire thing, right? We thought we were at the start of it last year, but obviously it went really bad really quick, so they had to tear it all down, bring in new players, bring in a whole new regime with a new young head coach in Dave Canales after impressing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you're starting from step one yet again. So with that being the case for the Panthers and the Falcons getting better, the Saints still a decently built team, the Bucs coming off of a division championship, the Panthers are just the odd man left out, and it's their second try with Bryce Young also. I think we haven't really gotten a chance to see what he is and what he has to really offer. So again, you fired Bryce Young's first head coach in Frank Reich, so now he has to learn a whole new system, adapt to that, and really learn that, and hopefully that will be a head coach, a system that will be with him for a couple years now to really see some growth. So we don't really know what we have there yet with Bryce Young, and also, they're coming off of a 2-15 year. I don't know if there's ever been such a drastic jump from 2-15 to like 9-8 or like 10-7 or something like that. I think that's really stretching it, but they did upgrade at certain positions that should help them along the offensive line, bringing in two new guards in that offensive line, bringing in Deontay Johnson as well, drafting Xavier Legette out of USC, most notably also to help Bryce Young. And it's hard, honestly, I just mentioned their record, it's hard to be worse than 2-15. So we're going to get some improvement. I really do believe that. I like Dave Canales. I think he did a good job with Baker Mayfield, but now it is something to point out, to remember that this is his first gig as a head coach at 43 years old. So how does he also adapt and learn as this process goes along will be something that does affect their overall season. But for right now, I feel like the Panthers, not too much to see there. They're still in a learning, developing process right now. I don't think they're by any means close to contention status, but that is the fourth team, a team that I predict to finish last in the division. Then to finish third, not so different from last year, the New Orleans Saints, I feel, or actually, they didn't finish third, they finished second. But this year, they're getting a little bit worse. And I feel like now we're going to start to see some more changes happening with the Saints team, because they've had a pretty bad cap situation, one of the worst, if not the worst, in the NFL for the last couple of years, which has prevented them from really going out there and testing the market, bringing in guys that they truly need, especially on that offensive line with Ryan Ramczyk now out. They didn't re-sign Andreas Pete also, so that offensive line and how it holds up for Derek Carr is going to be huge. Is Derek Carr the long-term answer for this team? I think that depends highly on Dennis Allen, if he's also the long-term option at head coach for this team, because again, they finished 9-8 last year, but I feel like this could be a year of regression a little bit more, especially with the Falcons getting better. I think the Bucs are still a formidable team. So not only if they get worse, but I feel like if they stay around the same, I think it's too much of the same thing at this point, and they're going to need to find a different head coach, a different voice, some more ideas to come in there and get this Saints team out of the mud that they're stuck in. And I say that, but they still have some good players. They're veterans like Cam Jordan, still in there as well. Demario Davis is still playing, still their starting linebacker. Tyrann Mathieu also still there, but they did add some good young, exciting players like Willie Gay, a linebacker in free agency. Chase Young should bring in some more pass rushing options for them. Pete Werner is a guy that they're really excited about as well. They drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama, and they have Brian Brees as well, a couple years removed from Clemson and being a formidable player there. So they have some players in there, obviously. Chris Olave, a big-time playmaker for them as well. But in most of their positions, it feels like they haven't changed too much, and it just feels monotonous at this point. And to me, when I describe something as monotonous, it just feels like average, middle of the table. And third place, because they can't get worse than the Panthers, is where I see the Saints finishing in 2024. And that could ultimately lead to them finding a new head coach and potentially parting ways with Derek Carr. And then at that point, you're really going to need a big change anyway. So that's sort of my predictions to go along with the my predictions on where they're going to end up in the division. But then it gets to the final two teams. And the final two teams, I think, were close, but also I've been pretty convinced with not this team, the first place team, obviously, when I will get to them. But for right now, the Bucks, I think, will finish second overall in this division, because it's hard to live up to these expectations a lot of the times, especially if, it is your first time going around. It is your first time sort of like being in this scenario where you're looked upon as one of the better teams in that division, arguably one of, if not the best team in that division. So living up to that after a season where I don't think a lot of people had the Bucks penciled in to be as good as they were, let alone win the division. Now they're in new territory, similar to other teams like the Texans and things like that. But with the Bucks, it was positive that they were able to bring back Mayfield, Evans, and Antoine Winfield. But even still, with those guys in the lineup, they finished 9-8 last year, and it was more so the case that the rest of the division was pretty bad. Honestly, the Falcons, with how talented they were, they finished like 7-10. The Saints, not too special, not too exciting. They finished 9-8 as well. And the Bucks, still bringing back the same team and losing some pieces along the way, like Devin White and Carlton Davis. I feel like there could be some hiccups there. I like Baker Mayfield. I don't think it's going to be a case where he just falls off the face of the earth or anything like that. But I feel like living up to those expectations now, not really upgrading drastically, or at least as drastically as the Falcons have, would just bump them down a peg and move them into second place. I think they're going to be around that same record as well. They have one of the easiest schedules in the entire NFL. This entire division does, because of having the Panthers in there, the Saints a little bit in there as well. They have one of the easiest schedules as well. But even saying that, I feel like they are still going to be a middle of the pack team, 10-7. I don't think they'll get more than 10 wins. I think 10-7 is their max, but 9-8 or something like that, or 8-9, I wouldn't be surprised that the Bucks are hovering around those records come the end of 2024. And also, just lastly to mention here, the departure of Dave Canales, just mentioning him and how he sort of turned everything around for Baker in just 1 year. Now Baker sort of essentially has to just go out there and do it all on his own. And is he ready to do that? Is he prepared enough to be the guy, take in a new system, learning a new scheme under a new voice, and how their relationship is? That's also something to keep in mind if we do see this offense struggling at some point in time. It could be because of that, because of a lot of new things changing. But to me, they are still more competitive. They have more talent than the Saints and the Panthers. So I think second would be just a minor digression here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then everyone's favorite, I've converted over to being a Falcons fan, at least for the NFC side of things, at least in this division, actually, I should say. In this division, it's too hard to go against the Falcons at this point in time. I've been really impressed with just everybody that they've added, not just the players as well, but their head coach, Raheem Morris, very big fan of him. His time in Los Angeles as the defensive coordinator, he just seemed like he was ready to take this next step. He was the interim head coach at one point in time, but it's a different sort of responsibility, a different job when it is your main thing to do. So bringing him in, I'm a big fan of. Also, their new offensive coordinator, Zach Robinson, also from the Los Angeles Rams, and how prolific their passing game was, with him being a major contributor of that. Now fitting in with all these new toys and weapons that he has at his disposal. I think is going to be a smooth transition with Pitts, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Bijan, Tyler Algier, all these guys that are very good, very young still at their positions as well. I think Zach Robinson could really take advantage of that. Their offensive line is also very underrated. You saw it with a great running game and even in pass protection as well. A lot of the issues they had with the passing game last year, I don't think it was a case where the offensive line was, giving them no time. It was more so the decision making by some quarterbacks in those games. So that's the offensive side of the ball, obviously, and how they've improved overall and on that side. But I didn't even mention Kirk Cousins, right, coming over as well. That just went over my head. But that's going to be obviously a major improvement. But on the defensive side of the ball, just recently, my biggest issue with them was the fact that they didn't address that. Yeah, their offense is great, but you need some defense in there to really have me at least believe that you were going to be a major player in this year's NFL regular season. And they went out and did that exactly. They went out and got Matthew Judon. They signed Justin Simmons, and now you form a great duo alongside Jesse Bates, who you see there on your screen. Judon is right away their best pass rusher on the edge, at least, to go along with Grady Jarrett in the inside. And on top of everything, the frosting on top of everything, they have the easiest schedule in the NFL. What more can go right for the Falcons at this point? They got so much better, and now they have the easiest schedule in the NFL. So really staying healthy is one of the only troubles I see with this team and sort of hindering that. Maybe if the worst thing that could happen is Kirk Cousins getting hurt, knock on wood that doesn't happen. But really, I can't point out something drastic that they need to really address because they've done a great job of doing it here in the last days of the offseason, now fully turning their attention to the Pittsburgh Steelers and hosting them in week 1 of the regular season. And it's going to go a long way. It's always good to have a good start if they're able to win that game. But that is pretty much all my predictions for the NFC South Division, how I believe it'll turn out in a few months down the road now when everything is said and done. But leave your guys' thoughts on what you think of my predictions and your thoughts on how you think the NFC South is going to turn out. But for right now, that'll do it for the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you guys for joining me on today's show. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media, and check out more content around the NFL and this show on both YouTube channels, the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel as well. Make sure to catch every live episode every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, catching more of breaking news like we had today, more headlines across the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you for joining me again on today's show, and hopefully you guys join me back again to end the week on tomorrow's show.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that great.